What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. My name is Chris. I am joined by two of the best in the business again. Guys, I think this is episode 30. I'm not sure. I believe so. Which is a monumental accomplishment on our end. Doing 30 episodes of talking and yapping about sports with just the minimal amount of views. Just insane. I don't think anyone else has this drive. But as I said, I'm joined by two of the best in the sports industry, Jurg and Dame. Guys, how are we today?
I'm excited. Little bit of dreary weather outside where we are, but that's not going to dampen our spirits. We're here to discuss news, have thoughtful, in-depth conversations as we always do. I'm hyped up for another episode.
I'm doing good. Not excited to be back in New York, but I'm excited to be back with you guys doing this.
Yeah, that's right. For everyone that's listening, Dame takes a lot of vacations, a lot of PTOs on this podcast, but irregardless, he pulls up and does his thing, I guess. But this week, pretty semi-stacked lineup, I'd say. A lot of variety. I think we're tackling all sports today, besides I think soccer. But yeah, we have hockey news, we got basketball news, we got baseball news, and football. I forgot we don't have football news. But it's normal. I think we're in the dry heap of the NFL offseason, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So it makes sense. All right. Well, I believe a draft lottery occurred. What was it, yesterday, Jurg?
Yep.
All right. So a draft lottery occurred for the NHL. I don't know who. I think I know who was the second pick because I think I saw it on Twitter and then I hit up Jurg about it. I didn't see what the first pick, but that's good. I'm gonna be surprised. Jurg, you're the NHL connoisseur. Talk to me. How do we feel with the lottery? Any surprises? Any slips? Any jump aheads, for lack of a better term? What stood out to you, I guess, if there's anything that stands out in a draft lottery besides the surprises?
Well, I guess the funny aspect about this draft was the fact that I think for the first time since it was either 2017 or 2018, the team with that had the best odds to get the first overall pick actually did get the first overall pick. So, as you said, you didn't see who got number one overall. The Buffalo Sabres, after having one of the worst possible seasons in recent memory, in the NHL, and that is saying a lot considering the fact that the Ottawa Senators have been pretty bad the last couple of years. But the Sabres were terrible. They were absolutely god-awful this season. At one point, I believe they tied the NHL record for most consecutive losses in a row. I don't think they set it, which I was very disappointed about. The Philadelphia Flyers let us down there. But aside from the disappointment that Philadelphia gave all of us, aside from just their own sports fans, the Sabres, of course, ultimately getting the number one pick. They were actually, funny enough, Chris, they were the last team to retain the number one overall pick when they had the worst odds. It was a couple years back.
Wow.
I believe it was the 2018 draft when they selected number one overall defenseman Rasmus Dahlin in that draft. And he's been a good player ever since, but obviously it takes more than just one number one overall pick, or if you ask the Edmonton Oilers, it takes a couple number one overall picks sometimes to get the franchise back in somewhat stable condition. And that's what the Buffalo Sabres are going to be hoping to do in this upcoming draft. It's really interesting, and I kind of found it funny that Buffalo got pick number one in this draft because this isn't necessarily a strong draft class compared to most years. There's no definitive number one prospect in this class like in past years, such as when Connor McDavid was coming out, when Austin Matthews was coming out. You even think back to last year where Alexis Lafreniere for the New York Rangers, he was deemed the number one overall pick for well over a year going into his draft. This draft class didn't really have that. You could argue it could be a defenseman. There is a top tier a couple of really good defensemen, but the number one defenseman most people will point to is Owen Power, coming out of the University of Michigan. The kid is projected by many to be the top pick in this draft class. Had a solid season for the University of Michigan, 16 points in 26 games. That was coming off a United States Hockey League developmental career for himself, where in his last season there he had 40 points in 45 games played. So a pretty good defenseman, can move the puck, is pretty big too, actually. He's not like a lot of short defensemen you see. He's 6'6", just under 215, I think. So the kid already is coming in with some build to him. He's going to obviously have to bulk up like most prospects in any sport. It feels like you could say that nearly about every single kid that comes down to draft. Like, they have to gain weight, they have to get their body ready for the pros. It's the whole tired spiel that you always hear, but he is the projected first overall pick, at least minimum going to be the first defenseman off the board if he isn't the first overall player. In terms of forwards, one guy that a lot of people are looking at is William Eklund out of the Swedish Hockey League. He had a pretty good year two for himself there in Sweden, something that happens in Europe. The way it works in Europe, I should say, when it comes to the hockey leagues, is that the top young players, they get brought up to the pro leagues right away, such as the Swedish Hockey League, the Finnish Liga, things like that. And so Eklund, he had his debut season last year at the age of 17, struggled a little bit, of course, had to play up to the level, looked a lot better in year two, looked a lot more comfortable out there, played the game well, and now he is projected by many as one of the top 2 or 3 forwards in this draft, and likely will be a top 2 to 5 pick anywhere in that range. So the Buffalo Sabres definitely have options for themselves in this upcoming draft. But like you said, Chris, and this is something you've mentioned a few times on the show because it's always exciting when someone new is coming in. The Seattle Kraken, the new expansion team,
Yes.
they actually won the number 2 overall pick in this lottery. Chris, I know you're excited about it because you really want to get into hockey. And I think Seattle, from everything I'm getting, like Seattle kind of feels like the vibe you want to go with.
Absolutely. I also love their color scheme as well. But no, I mean, they were just formed, what, 2 years ago? I mean, yeah, right? 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, so about 2, 3 years ago, it was officially said that they would become the next expansion team, and now this is finally going to be the offseason where it happens. Shortly after the Stanley Cup Finals and the playoffs conclude, the expansion draft will be held, and essentially, if for those of you that maybe actually paid attention back when Vegas was coming in, or if you any older viewers that are old enough to remember when expansion teams have come in other sports, it is what you think the current teams around the league will be protecting players on their rosters. They'll leave certain players, essentially wide open, not protected, that are eligible to be drafted. And then one by one, Seattle will go through every single team and draft guys. Not just for the main NHL roster, because obviously with 30 plus teams, you're not going to get 30 plus players, right? Because it's only 23 skaters or 20 to 23 players on the NHL roster at a given time. Of course, goalies included. And you're obviously not just going to go for that. Probably going to get some young players here and there from these teams if it's available to just put in the AHL. But ultimately, yeah, Seattle is going to go through the expansion draft first. And then depending on what happens in that expansion draft, they will move on to the 2021 NHL draft, where with that second overall pick, they're essentially going to be in the position of, hey, what top player did the Buffalo Sabres not go with? And we could run with here. For Buffalo, it's really going to be interesting what decision they go with, because they're definitely going to impact what Seattle does. I think if Buffalo edges towards picking a forward, I wouldn't be surprised if Owen Power went over to the Seattle Kraken with the number 2 overall pick. And what a pick that would be, as the first pick in franchise history. Pick a 6'6" defenseman. The kid can move. He's not a slow poke out there. He's got a little bit of speed to him, especially at that height, at that size. He projects to be a pretty good player in the NHL, and it would be a great pick for Seattle. But obviously, that's a wait and see kind of deal, and it will definitely depend on how they build out their roster. There could potentially be, because there's always predictions and projections, there could potentially be some pretty good defensemen that find their way over to Seattle in the expansion draft, depending on who teams decide to protect and whatnot. So that'll be something that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on, and when the expansion draft time comes, definitely give a full report on it and like what Seattle did. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting in the league to see what those top 2 picks end up becoming, and then how everything trickles down from there. There wasn't like there were a couple shifts in terms of who got what picks, but nothing crazy like we've seen in recent years with like the New York Rangers and them jumping up to the number 1 and number 2 picks the last couple of years, or anything like that. Like some movement here and there, but relatively not bad. The Anaheim Ducks get the 3rd overall pick. The New Jersey Devils get 4th. Columbus gets 5th. I believe that is a bit of a jump up, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't think off the top of my head, I don't believe they were the 5th worst team. So, a solid for Columbus. They're kind of hitting the reset button in that organization, right? So that's a good pick for them. The Detroit Red Wings at 6. Steve Yzerman, you just give him another top caliber pick. He's probably going to pick a pretty good player. He's just collecting assets at this point, and he has a chance to rebuild Detroit, and that's what he's going to keep on doing here. San Jose Sharks finally have their own pick back after trading their last 2. That's definitely something that San Jose needs. They're in this really weird position, and you guys, I'm sure you could think of an NBA team right away, where they've spent a lot of money on their players, and they have talented players, but they're not been a playoff team the last 2 years. Like, yeah, so whatever NBA team you're thinking of off the top of your head, essentially consider the San Jose Sharks that team. There's some talented players on this core. They should be better, but for some reason, the last 2 seasons, things just did not click. I would actually say the Sharks kind of jumped up a little bit here, considering they were ahead of some of these teams that are later on. So I'll just finish off the draft order here. The LA Kings at number 8, the Vancouver Canucks at number 9, the Ottawa Senators at number 10, my Blackhawks at 11, go Hawks, the Calgary Flame at 12, the Philadelphia Flyers at 13. I really don't care about you, Philly. Again, you didn't beat Buffalo that one extra time to give us a new losing streak, so I'm not happy. The Dallas Stars at 14, the defending Western Conference champions from the Stanley Cup Finals to the 14th overall pick. Oh, what a difference. Not even a year, like 6-7 months makes, considering the bubble. And the New York Rangers, no lottery luck this time around, 15th overall. So that concludes the draft lottery and everything that happened. Obviously, as we get closer to the draft, we'll definitely speak on a little bit about that. Maybe see some written work about it somewhat. We'll see, but that's it on the draft lottery. In terms of the playoffs, I'm not going to go in depth in terms of like what's going on in the series, but just to let the people know, the second round has started. I would normally say semifinals, but it's technically not being called that this year because different playoff structure. The Winnipeg Jets and the Montreal Canadiens finally got going last night, and Montreal is just trying to continue their Cinderella run, which, yes, the Toronto Maple Leafs choked a 3-1 series lead. They're the Golden State Warriors of the NHL, except they don't win at all. And instead of choking 3-1 in the finals, they choked 3-1 in the first round on multiple occasions. So they choked the 3-1 lead to Montreal. Montreal won that game 7-3-1, ironically enough. And then Montreal won game 1 against Winnipeg. Final score, I believe, was 5-3. Yes, it was. In other series, Colorado is facing Vegas. Those two teams that I've been dreaming about facing off with each other. Colorado has jumped out to a 2-0 lead. They're looking like the offensive powerhouse that we expect them to be. Vegas definitely is going to need home ice advantage to do some cooking for them because they're down 0-2. And if there's one team in this playoffs you don't want to fall down 0-2, it's against the Colorado Avalanche, or it would be the Tampa Bay Lightning, who currently hold a 2-0 series lead against the Carolina Hurricanes. Despite the fact that, honestly, both those games have been low scoring, both game 1 and 2 in that series ended with the final score 2-1. And so the fact that the Tampa Bay Lightning are not scoring a lot, but they hold a lead, that's a dangerous sign for Carolina. They are playing tonight, actually, at 8 p.m. on the USA Network. So that'll be an interesting game that I hope a lot of people ended up tuning into by the time you hear this episode. And hopefully that series becomes something, or we might see the defending Cup champions just continue to tear through the playoffs. And then, of course, the Islanders and the Boston Bruins tied up at a 1-1. As of now, that's looking like the most competitive series of this second round, depending on what happens between Winnipeg and Montreal. But yeah, it's looking like, we got some pretty good matchups here in round 2. Obviously, we're going to wait another week to see how it all plays out. Probably going to give a little bit more analysis come next week. But yeah, I'm excited for the playoffs. I'm excited that the draft lottery has come and gone. And we're just looking forward to continuing things here on the hockey side of things.
All right. Beautiful as always, Jurg. As we wind down to the end of the NHL season, essentially, I think the playoffs are going quicker than the NBA playoffs. But I'm just hearing good things as always from Jurg.
We need
the internet.
Things.
What was that?
We need good things. Like after the last month of the season, where not even last month, last couple of weeks, where all the suspensions were going on and the NHL wasn't exactly handling things properly. And it's funny because a couple of suspensions have already been handed out in these playoffs, and we're awaiting word on another one actually as we currently speak. Probably we'll get word of it either later tonight or tomorrow. We need to push the good things because right now, in terms of other aspects, I'm trying to push that away. I'm trying to look at the positive here.
Absolutely, and who better to talk about that than the internet's best NHL analyst, Jurg.
Too kind.
Thank you. No, actually, thank you, Jurg. But we move on to NBA news, and hugely out of left field, really out of left field news. I woke up to this. I'm pretty sure no one expected this. The Boston Celtics got eliminated by the Brooklyn Nets in 5 games. I think a few days ago. I don't Tuesday, I think, or Monday. One of those. Yeah, one of those days earlier in the week. And the morning after, Danny Ainge, president of basketball operations for the Boston Celtics, stepped down and resigned. And I think Brad Stevens left the coaching gig and is now elevated to Danny Ainge's spot, which means Brad Stevens is now the president of basketball operations for the Boston Celtics, which also leaves the head coaching job currently vacant for the Boston Celtics. So Danny Ainge leaves, Brad Stevens steps up to that position, and the Boston Celtics are in search of a new head coach. Guys, I speak for all of us. Unexpected, speechless. I guess I wouldn't go that far, but because none of us give a shit about the Celtics in this podcast. But yeah, very surprising. And all right, I'll go first with this, and then I guess I'll go to Damian after. I think Brad Stevens was a great coach. I thought they had a decent developmental staff, and they actually developed players relatively well. Danny Ainge, I think, was looked at because of this one trade as a god amongst men in terms of just, operating as president of basketball operations for this one team. Over the past few years, he has failed to. All right, let me get the positives out of Danny Ainge's tenure here. He traded for Kyrie Irving. That deserves a little bit of praise. He actually made the move for that. He traded Isaiah Thompson, the 8th pick, got in Kyrie Irving, and he signed Gordon Hayward as well. I think after that, it's just been a failure. The conservative nature of how he operates things. Did not want to trade for Kawhi Leonard. Did not want to trade for Anthony Davis. Did not want to trade for Jimmy Butler. Moves that you basically should make when you're kind of on the brink of just the championship run, because the Celtics have been flirting with like the semifinals, the Eastern Conference Finals for so long at this point. You needed to make that move to get over the hump to actually win the title or at least compete for it, but he just refused to make it. And I think he had a affection for his homegrown talent, for the Terry Roziers of the world, for the Marcus Smarts of the world. And I get it, Marcus Smart kind of exemplifies what Boston's all about, but at some point, when you have a star available out there, like every disgruntled star, the Celtics were always quote unquote rumored to be like linked to. And every time you would hear after a move was made, oh yeah, the Celtics were about to trade for him. They were close to trading for him. They were about to draft Tyler Hero. Oh, but the Miami Heat took him. It's always some nonsense with them. It got to a point where it was just ridiculous. This season was a complete disappointment. I think it got to a point where he knew that the perception around the league, the perception about the Celtics was changing. The perception about him was changing towards the negative side, and he decided to step down. And I think, low-key, that is best for Boston, because I think they're going to go into the offseason now, just kind of like a rehabilitation project, which is kind of weird because I feel like the Celtics are one of those organizations that, like, I guess have their shit together, even though this offseason they don't. And Danny Ainge is gone. Everything's on the table. Brad Stevens moves up. Head coaching job vacant. I think Brad Stevens will do a better job than Danny Ainge. I don't know if that's saying much. But I'm so bullish on this thing. I don't know how I feel. I think it's about time that he stepped down, but I didn't expect it. I don't necessarily know what to expect going forward with the Celtics. But yeah, I mean, Dame, help me out. Do you think this is first of all, your thoughts on it in general, and do you think this is a step forward or a step backward for them?
For the Celtics, first of all, I think it's a step forward for the Celtics, because I've been saying for the longest time that Danny Ainge, it's not that he's not good. He's not that he's overrated. It's just I don't think he was good at what he does. Of course, like you mentioned, the whole Nets trade, that probably the biggest robbery in history of sports. That you could give him, obviously you give him credit for that, but and that I guess gave him like 10 years of like can't fire me no matter what I do. And of course, you gotta give him his credit for the Kyrie thing, because the Celtics, like you said, always mentioned with these star guys on the trade market because of all the assets they stockpiled and just never using them. And I guess he kind of used a little bit of that to get Kyrie, so you give him credit there. But like overall, like, all this talent and all these assets that you had, you thought the Celtics are going to be a dynasty team for years to come. And yet they weren't. They never went out and made the big move that they needed to. Kyrie, I wouldn't really count it as it because he left them. But I do think this is good for the Celtics, because it was just about time that Danny Ainge was out of there. It's just they were very like stagnant with their development. So bringing in Brad Stevens, but thing is with Brad Stevens, I don't know how much of an upgrade that really is, because how much experience does he have in a front office role at all? He obviously coached at Butler for many, many years, and the rest of that he coached the Celtics. I don't know his past before Butler, if he had any front office connections or worked with any kind of front office in the NBA. So that move to me is kind of sus, and I don't really know if it's an upgrade. But the thing was the head coach as well. Like Brad Stevens really, I don't think got the best out of his players either. Like I do think he's a good coach, but this season and really previous seasons, I don't think he really got the full potential out of his team. They're really disappointing. So maybe bringing a new coach will be better for this team. I don't know what candidates they have, but I saw Jason Kidd as one of them. Maybe that'll be good. I also
Oh
read an
God.
article. I also read an article on maybe Jay Wright from Villanova. They could bring him in since Brad Stevens has made connections with these college coaches, and I know Jay Wright is one of the best ever. So that could be a good option. But overall, Danny Ainge needed to go. Brad Stevens maybe eventually was needed to go, maybe a year too early, but he was going to go eventually as well if this continued. And I don't think it was overall good for the Celtics the direction they're going in.
Jurg?
So I definitely think at the end of the day, something had to happen. I've been a massive proponent of this for like the last 2 seasons where while Danny Ainge, he's done some good things in his tenure. You think because he's been the general manager for a long time, like, but when I just think back to his tenure, I'm like, okay, think of the four biggest acquisitions he made in his career, right? And I don't want to get too nitpicky here, but Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, Kyrie Irving, and then the Nets haul. All three of those guys you got because they were going to leave those teams eventually. They had put their organizations in no-win situations, and you were able to get them, which is good on him for being able to execute, right? So I got to give him some credit there. And then the Brooklyn Nets deal, you took advantage of the fact that I forget how much he was experienced at this point, but of course, as we know, at the end of the day, Billy King was not a good GM. He was just not. And the now former Nets owner, Prokhorov, he was pushing for them to be a contender. He wanted big names. They just went to Brooklyn and all that, and got old man Kevin Garnett, old man Paul Pierce, old man Jason Terry. Like, he just got a bunch of old players to add to Darren Williams and Joe Johnson. So it's like when you look at all of Danny Ainge's big time moves, it'll always be at the end of the day what came out of those moves. And aside from the one championship from the '08 Boston Celtics, who act like that they three-peated, then nothing else has come from it. Again, I know in recent years they've been making it to the conference finals a few times. They faced off with LeBron, I think, twice in the conference finals. They faced off, of course, against Miami last season in the bubble, which, of course, obviously it counts. Like, I'm not even going to entertain the stupid bubble people, but yes, it does count. They made the conference finals last year. So you look at it, and I know for a lot of people, they're like, oh, I would kill if my team made it to the conference finals 3 of the last 5 seasons, right? A lot of people would. Heck, even for my own team, like 3 conference finals appearances in the last 5 years wouldn't be too bad. But at some point, while it's nice to keep getting there, when are you going to break through? When are you going to finally take that next step? And I know Tatum and Brown are young, and I'm not putting this on them. So all of these words I'm about to say exclude Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown from this, because I'm not expecting them to, they're not the sole reasons for this. But like you guys said, Brad Stevens' coaching and Danny Ainge's general managing have led to the fact that the Celtics have not made it back to the NBA Finals since 2010, predominantly, especially mainly Danny Ainge. Like, when you have the treasure trove of draft picks that he's had the privilege of having for the last 7 seasons, you can't tell me it's a success that they got a couple a couple Eastern Conference Finals appearances out of all those picks. I know, and even with those picks, he made some good moves. The Jaylen Brown pick, at first, a lot of people criticized it, has turned out to be one of the best picks from that draft, if I'm not mistaken. Trading down to get some extra assets from Philly, and then they pick Markelle Fultz, and you pick Jason Tatum, who I guess you essentially wanted the entire time. Like, that was excellent by Danny Ainge right there. Like, he's made some great moves. I have to give him the credit, but he never made the final move. And this is why with general managers, I hold them to a little bit of a different standard. While it's nice, you've been around, you've had success, yes, etc. Did you make the moves to get your team over that hump? And you can't really say he's done that over the last decade. Even if you want to try to point to the KG and Ray Allen acquisitions, that was 14 years ago at this point. I like, are we really we don't give the best of the best that kind of credence in terms of the professional athlete, aside from like Brady and LeBron. Like, how many times have we seen Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving hit big time shots, but then for some reason, coming into the playoffs, we all question, like, how far are they going to go? Can they work it out? Despite the fact that they're all world level players. And yet for some reason there are people that'll die on the hill of Danny Ainge despite the fact his biggest the best moves he ever made came 14 years ago. It's just insane to me. So I think at the end of the day, something had to happen. And I honestly thought the shocking part, Chris, kind of like what you mentioned, I'm shocked that it ended up with Brad Stevens becoming the executive and not just remaining the coach. Because I expected Danny Ainge to eventually step down. I think it was eventually going to come to that. I don't think they were never going to quote unquote fire him because he played there. He's been there essentially like so much of his professional career. Like they weren't going to do that to him. They were going to quote unquote let him go, aka get the hell out of here. We want someone else running it. But I'm really interested to see how Brad Stevens does with this. Like Dame said, a lot of different coaching candidates he could go after. He's been around the league for so long now that he has connections in the professional ranks of coaches that he could go after and interview. And of course, he'll always have that tie to college because how many months ago was it that he was being offered the Indiana job for men's basketball still? So, like, he could go anywhere for his coaching selection. It'll be interesting to see what path he takes. But I'm really going to be intrigued now. Like, what coach is going to get the task of of helping Tatum and Brown in this team, and will Brad Stevens be able to pull off the move that Danny Ainge just I don't know if he couldn't. I don't want to say he couldn't make, but he just wouldn't and didn't make. So that's going to be the big part for me personally. I'm really interested to see what this future is. But in terms of like gut reaction, I think moving on from Danny Ainge was the right move. Now, is Brad Stevens the right guy? That's a question because Dame was asking earlier. He didn't have any managerial connections prior to his NBA career getting started. This was all the work because of the work he's done in Boston since he got there.
Yeah, so a few things. I don't know. I just feel like the Celtics every year were just the empty threats. Like I always knew they were a very good team. They played defense. They played hard. You had talent like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and but I don't know. Just year by year, you never thought the Celtics were going to be a championship contender, right? Even though they're one of the top teams in the East for God knows how long. I don't know. It's just I feel like their best chance was with the first year with Kyrie Irving, and then after that, it just kind of fell apart. Of course, Kyrie got hurt in the playoffs that year. So like they lost in the conference finals, but yeah, I don't know. I do think the the players lost faith in Danny Ainge. I mean, I don't know if this is a real quote or like it's a real thing, but I think Danny Ainge feels like he lost the connection with the players. And probably, I mean, like there's people around the league. I mean, sports analysts and just they always say that people around the league don't trust Danny Ainge because of like the Isaiah Thomas thing. I never thought the Isaiah Thomas thing was a bad move because of just Isaiah Thomas in general and just the uncertainty of his health. But the way he went by it, like I guess, was like by the lying and all that, and just promising him that he would resign, and then you just trade him without even telling him. That has like a big impact on players around the league. So I don't know. It's just this conservative approach that he's always maintained, a lot of stubbornness, and I think players, even in the Celtics organization, looked at that and they're just like, "Oh, why?" It's kind of skeezy. I do think they have more respect for Brad Stevens. So, and I think Brad Stevens is a young dude, so I don't think he'll be as out of touch as Danny Ainge. I'm pretty sure he's picked. Like I heard that Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens had a close connection, and I'm pretty sure that he taught him things along the way. So maybe he'll catch up on it rather quickly. It's gonna say a lot about Brad Stevens' tenure going forward on who the coach is gonna be. Like I think that's gonna be like the one like that kind of gives you a glimpse of like how it might go. Jason Kidd. I mean, if we're gonna like hire the Jason Kidds of the world, and I'm just like, oh, are we doing this like that players coach type of thing where it's not really a coach, but some of the players kind of look up to, and they just like basically what Fizdale was essentially. I don't necessarily know if that's the Celtics way of going by things. But at the end of the day, you do got to keep Jason Tatum happy, and I know he's like on contract for 4 or 5 more years, but just uncertainty going forward. Do you guys have any predictions on who the head coach might be?
I feel it's gonna be someone that we had no idea it was gonna be. That's my prediction.
Right.
I saw like, a few hours before the podcast. I saw Becky Hammon as like a name floating around.
I feel like her name always has to float around just because like she's a female, so they're always gonna float her name around whatever head coaching position it is
For good PR,
you think? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and so that no one takes Dame's point the wrong way. Everyone here believes that Becky Hammond does deserve a shot at some point,
Yeah.
100%. But
Yeah.
it, like Dame said, like a lot of people are just always going to say her name, but a lot of these organizations aren't going to pull the trigger. I think the only one that maybe will is when Pop eventually decides to
Yeah.
stop
Yeah.
coaching.
Yep.
Like he's just going to give it to Becky because she deserves it. So
And if she
I don't see
if she
Boston doing it.
succeeds, like that'll open a lot more doors for other women. But for now, I
Yeah.
just think a lot of it is just gonna be like a PR stunt just to make them look good.
Yeah, and why I don't think, like, I know she like getting to work with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown is nice, but would she want to leave the Spurs for that organization? Honestly, like
Exactly.
I don't
No,
know.
no, knowing that you could possibly take over for Pop and have that good stability in the front office and ownership for so many years.
The problem is, who wants to play for Boston, right? It's just like, I don't think anyone wants to go there. And I mean, for obvious reasons, everyone knows why, but like, they're not an appealing sight. I just think that level of stability that they've maintained the last, decade, I guess. They drafted well, they traded well. But other than that, it's just like no free agents are going to sign there, which is why I don't understand why Danny Ainge never, went for the trade, because you're not going to get marquee free agents. So that's why I feel like the non aggressiveness towards like trading for like a big star was mind boggling to me. But yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, the Celtics, they need it's not even a rebuild, but it's just like a retooling of what their structure is, right? They got a lot of decisions to make going forward. You have two cornerstone pieces, so you're in a good place essentially, roster wise. But now you're gonna have to fill in a lot of other glaring needs. But it starts at the top, so we'll see how that goes. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Nope.
Nah.
Okay. We move on to some devastating news as Joel Embiid suffered was it left or right? He
Right.
saw. All
I
right,
think.
well, he suffered a torn meniscus in Game 4 of the Sixers Wizards playoff series first round matchup, and he is quote day to day end quote. He will be treating you with therapy and I don't know, just treatment. Basically, what I got from it, and I don't know, Jurg, correct me if I'm wrong, is that he's opting not to get surgery on it.
Yeah, he's got the thing with meniscus injuries is that it's 50-50. Like you could get surgery, but oftentimes there's no surgical procedure needed, right? Like you can actually just get like a minor procedure, not a full surgery done to it, and then you could immediately start like resting it, rehabbing, etc. So that from what you're saying, it sounds like that's the path he's going down.
And I do not agree with that path. I think not getting the surgery. Look, it would be like, I'm assuming it would be like a 4 to 6 week process of recovery. But look, Joel Embiid's a big dude, and you're risking a lot by not getting that surgery. I get it. I get it. They're going to be facing the Atlanta Hawks in the semifinals, and it's not going to be an easy matchup without Joel Embiid. I don't know. I feel like rushing it would be detrimental to his long-term health, in my opinion, because look, I think the Sixers will eventually meet the. Well, I think the Sixers will go to the Eastern Conference Finals. I believe they could afford to let Embiid rest this series. I think it'll be a lot tougher, but I do think they'll eventually beat the Hawks. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very concerned about this. Because I know he's not gonna get the surgery, and I don't know how he's gonna perform. I assume not as Joel Embiid as we know him out to be. I'm just worried. I'm worried about this decision. It sucks that this happened because I think the Sixers were a legitimate threat to the Brooklyn Nets and had a legitimate shot to make the NBA Finals. And I think this literally changes everything. And if Joel Embiid's not the same, which I think that may be the case, especially if he does not get the surgery, I think the winner of the Nets Bucks will be going to the final essentially. Even though it's a semifinals thing, I think they'll beat the Sixers with a limited or no Joel Embiid. But I mean, just all in all, it sucks that this happened. The timing of it, Jurg, what do you got to say about this?
So it definitely, obviously, timing wise, it sucks. And for the 76ers, you just feel for them because they had a real chance this
Mm-hmm.
playoffs, right? Like it really felt like they could have done something here and potentially making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, which I would love to see in a fully healthy Embiid, Simmons, and that team try to go up against either Milwaukee or the likely outcome facing the Nets. It's just a blow because it looked like Philly made real strides this year. They were much better this season compared to the last few years. I don't care what people said. Having Doc Rivers has helped that team. I think while he's a coach that a lot of us harp on, and I myself, I don't think he's a perfect coach by any stretch of the imagination. I've criticized him before, but Doc you could feel his imprint on this team. They're tougher, especially mentally this year, going up in the playoffs, right? Like they didn't even win a playoff game last season in the last year of Brett Brown there. And then this season they win in 5, and in a full game without Joel Embiid, the team steps up and performs well. What does that say about the job that those guys have done? So ultimately, at the end of the day, you hate to see it. They're going to go up against Atlanta now. Like you mentioned, that's really going to be intriguing because it makes Clint Capella's job a lot easier for ATL. So there's that. Simmons is going to have to take a bigger role, at least being more aggressive, I would assume, unless he's just going to pass every which way, which that might still happen now that I think about it. I don't know. I just ultimately, at the end of the day, Embiid, even if he comes back, if he's not 85, 90%, or even 100%, like they're not going to win the championship or even advance to the finals. Like a fully healthy Embiid would have made things a lot more interesting. But at this rate, I know he's going to get a little bit of rest before round 2 starts, but I don't know, man. I don't like Philly's title chances here now. Like I think they could still beat Atlanta, but past that, I don't see them competing against anyone else without the big fella being all the way there.
Oh, Dave, before you go, Jurg, do you think the Sixers could beat the Hawks without Embiid?
I think I think they could, but it won't be easy. Like
Yeah.
that series would almost definitely go to 6 or 7, right? And I compliment how they look a lot better and a lot mentally more prepared. Can they handle a game 6 in Atlanta if they're up 3-2? Like that's still a legitimate question. Like you can have that question about this team. Like they look better, they look more prepared, but could they handle that kind of raucous environment? Because say what you will, if Atlanta's down 3-2 in a game 6, like those fans are going to come hard, whether you expect them to or not. So it's going to be really intriguing to see. But I would still favor Philly in that matchup because I think while Trae Young is just so dynamic, I think it's a lot easier for Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons to dictate the offense rather than Trae. Because and this is what I hope Philly does personally, come the key possessions in that game, you got to stick your best defenders. And Ben Simmons or Matthias Thybulle bothering Trae Young, like that's going to make Atlanta's life a lot harder. So I would give Philly a slight edge, but it's going to 6 or 7. They're not sweeping Atlanta without Embiid. I don't think they would have swept him with him, but they nowhere near that without JoJo.
I think it would have been a gentleman's sweep with Embiid healthy. But
Right.
Dame?
Yeah, let's just get out the way. Like, Embiid's not healthy, they're not making the finals. Like, just get that out the way. When it comes to the Hawks series, I do believe that they could beat the Hawks without him, but personally, I would pick the Hawks to win. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Sixers would pull it out. With Embiid, bro, though, it's like it's an every year thing now. Whether it's in the playoffs or the regular season, it's just you think the Sixers, like, this is the year they get it together. This is the year Embiid stays healthy. Then this is the year that him and Simmons like get their chemistry working, which is looking like it was this year. And then boom, you get hit with this meniscus tear. Like, I'm getting sick and tired of it, especially since the Nets formed this stupid super team this year, and I really thought the Sixers were one of the teams that could take them down. And now I gotta deal with this, and this just takes one other team out of it, and all I have left is the Bucks now because I don't even know if anyone in the West could beat the Nets at this point. So I'm really sick and tired of it, but it does suck because he is such a great player. So it was gonna be MVP this year. He still healthy again, but overall for the Sixers, it does suck. It sucks for him, and who knows if he'll ever be fully healthy for a regular season and postseason to really show his true potential and be a real championship contender.
I mean, like, I look at the play. I mean, did you guys see the play?
No.
I feel like, Jurg, did you see the play?
No.
I think he tried to yam it, right? And I'm just like, Embiid, just go up with you. Why do you got to try and yam it right now, man? It's just like, or a Euro step or something. It's just, I mean, look, I don't want to blame it. It was like a freak thing, but
It was like a
man,
post up or a drive.
no, it was like a drive,
Okay.
and you just try to yam it, and I was just so upset, man. Because like Dame said, like now man, of course, like the Nets have an easier path, bro. It's just
Yeah, if the Bucks don't challenge them, they're guaranteed to win the East.
yeah. I don't know. I don't want Embiid to rush this. Like, I mean, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but like, I do not want him to rush this, man. Like, you have like the rest of your career to look at, and I mean, like, tear meniscuses aren't a joke, dog. Especially if you don't get surgery on them. Like, that's a huge risk. Like I've said before. So, and also it is Embiid with injury history. So like you don't want to like kind of clown around with that. But I think he'll take maybe the first 2 games off against the Hawks, and then like I think he'll play depending on how it goes. Yeah, I feel like how the series starts against the Hawks will dictate how fast he'll come back. But yeah, other than that, it's not looking that great for Philly. I think I'll give a better analysis after I see Joel Embiid's first game back, because like a matchup against Capello is not easy. Like that's actually like a physical battle in my opinion. But you do have Dwight Howard to kind of fill in for him. Obviously he's not Embiid, but I mean the toughness is maintained, right? So yeah, just a big blow. Hope Embiid comes back strong. And
Please.
yeah, please. Come on, guys. But yeah, other than that, you got nothing else to say? Final thoughts, gentlemen, or nothing?
Just hope he's back, hope he's healthy, and can help
Beat the
Philly go
Nets.
for it. Yeah, beat
Yeah,
the Nets.
please beat the Nets.
Yeah.
Please. All right, and now we move on to our main event, which is MLB talk. Jurg, how far along are we in the MLB season?
So we have actually, a blink of an eye, and it might shock you, but we are actually starting to make some real progress in the 2021 Major League Baseball season. Every team is well over 50 games played, with a few creeping very close to the 60 game mark. So we're definitely starting to see teams show their true identities of themselves. I think the only team that has failed to hit 50 games played are the Mets. So, take with that with what you will. But aside from them, a lot of teams have played. We're seeing, who's stepped up so far this season, what teams are getting great great contributions from their main players. And along the way, fellas, just like with every season, we've seen some big surprises and some real disappointments, and that's what we're going to be reviewing here today.
Yeah, do you want me to just go off my headlines?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean headlines, whatever you guys want to talk about. Free discussion right now.
I got like 4 things I want to talk about.
Go ahead.
All right. I'm just gonna start off with my team. So the Yankees have been an absolute disappointment to me. I know their record kind of looks good and they're in third place in their division, but this is absolutely not what I expected. The Yankees are always known for their great hitting, but this year has been the complete opposite. Their pitching has been spectacular, from starting pitching to bullpen. It's been great. Like there's been a little inconsistency in the starting rotation, but overall the starting pitching has been good and their bullpen has been absolutely fantastic. Best bullpen in the league. But they're hitting, oh my god, it's god awful. Like I don't even think they have a guy hitting over 290. Like, and they have like multiple, half their lineup is hitting in the 100s. Like I got to watch every game and just see 1 or 2 runs every single game. And unless Garrett Cole or another starting pitcher is throwing up 1 or 0 runs, like they're losing the game. So it's getting ridiculous. And I don't know how they're gonna change it, because they're not gonna trade any of these hitters because they're too big in names and they're not gonna get fair value in return. And if they trade, they're obviously not going to do it, but if they trade like a guy like Aaron Judge, DJ LeMahieu, Gleyber Torres, Gary Sanchez, like the fan base would riot, even though they need upgrades at these positions, but they literally just can't. They're stuck at these positions because of the way their roster is constructed. But hopefully they can't turn around, because it's really just the hitting. Like their pitching is fine, and for years and years, it's always been the hitting is there, but the pitching isn't. So of course, the 1 year they get their pitching right, their hitting hasn't worked. Whatever. Going to another team in the AL East, the Boston Red Sox have been an unexpected surprise. I thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league, but here they are, second place in the division above the Yankees. Granted, they haven't played the Yankees yet this year, but they're playing them this weekend. So we're going to see what they're really made of once they start playing the Yankees, even though I obviously just shit on the Yankees, so I'm kind of screwing up my point here. But regardless, the Red Sox haven't played the Yankees, and they haven't played the Yankees well the past couple years. Like the Yankees have dominated the head-to-head matchups. So this weekend will be a big one to really see what the Red Sox are really made of, and honestly see what the Yankees are made of. Going to Chris's NL East, this, many people, including myself, predicted would be the best division in the sport, but it's actually been the worst division in the sport based off standings. I think they only have one team above 500.
Which team is that?
It's some orange and blue team. I don't even know. But you literally have 4 out of the 5 teams below 500, and the team in first place is only 6 games above 500. And the only reason they could be above 500 is because they played like 20 games less than everybody else. So once they make up those games, we'll probably see them below 500 as well. But yeah, it doesn't make sense to me, because I still think think these teams are really good. It just doesn't make sense why they're all below 500, and their run differential is all negative besides the Marlins and the Mets, which is 5-6, which is barely anything. That's a 500 team. So that's an unexpected surprise to me. Like, there's no really big injuries to any of these teams either that are below 500. I get the Mets have injuries, but to these other teams, like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just the first like half struggles, but we'll see how that goes. And finally, a team that is really surprising in the NL in general is actually, do they have the best record in the league? Oh no, they have the second best record in the entire league, and the best record in the NL. It's a San Francisco Giants.
Yep.
Wow, what a surprise they've been. They're 34-21 in a division with the Padres and the Giants. They're ahead of both of them. In that
the Dodgers?
Yeah, Dodgers and Padres. Sorry, they're above the Dodgers and Padres. Two teams that when we did our preseason podcast, we said that these two teams are going to dominate at the top, with these other three teams just being at the bottom, and they're just going to beat up on each other at the top. But now the San Francisco Giants, who just they're tearing it up. Their starting pitching is great. Their managers done a fantastic job. I know there was this one game this year where it was a really close game at the end of the game, and the managers did put in a pinch hitter for 3 at bats in a row, and 3 at bats in a row it was a base hit, and they won the game because of that. So just something like that sticks in my head. Just like, wow, that's everything's really clicking for this team. Their situational hitting is great, and their pitching has been excellent. So that's a really big surprise to me because I didn't expect them to be good, and neither did anybody else.
All right. Jurg, anything that you want to talk about that's been going on in baseball? Any like surprises? Any headlines for you? This is again free discussion.
So funny enough, shout out to our guy, friend of the show, James Barcia, because me and him we've been discussing this like this season more than most because of how shortened 2020 was, and there was still a transition into coming into 2021. It felt like the first month and a half, and Dame, I wonder if you agree with this. The first month and a half of the season kind of felt like just an expanded spring training, really.
Yeah.
Because even though there technically was spring training, like guys still had to come back, be with the team again, get into a full rhythm. I think this was probably the hardest time for new players going to their teams to have to transition, aside from 2020 in and of itself, because we're still just recovering from it, right? So I think that was a big deal.
You kind of saw that with the Dodgers. They really started off like I think they started the first 10 games kind of hot, and then they really slowed down. Like they were a 500 team for a while. They just started picking up lately. So
yeah,
really
exactly.
Yeah.
And from some teams, like kind of like you mentioned, Dame, the Yankees starting off really slow. This is definitely like if we're talking about disappointments, the Minnesota Twins have definitely disappointed me.
Oh my god, yes.
They've played better like the last 2 weeks. Funny enough, ESPN released an article, and a lot of people are expecting the Twins to be one of those teams that kind of has like a big second half surge here. But the Minnesota Twins have been very disappointing to this point of the season. And I think part of it, and you're talking about trends, Chris, the biggest trend this season is no one can hit. Aside from home runs, no one can just hit the ball properly. We're on pace for like the most no-hitters since God knows how long in a season, because so many pitchers are, yes, there are pitchers that are performing well, but just so many of these hitters, this is the worst case it's been in recent years, where it's go big or go home on at-bats, where it's like if you're not hitting home runs, you're striking out. And it's one thing when it's just the power hitters in the game. It's one thing where it's those guys that they can only hit 260, but they could still, hit for 30, 35 home runs for you. Or a couple of these old veterans like Nelson Cruz. Like, I'm not expecting Nelson Cruz to be a 300 hitter, but I'm still expecting him to have the power for like 30 homers, which I believe he is on pace for this season, or at least close to it. So he's doing his job. But aside from that, like these teams that we've seen struggle early, the Yankees and the Twins, the Dodgers, as Dame mentioned, with their little rut as of late, it's because they're not hitting. Even when you look at the NL East, the Mets, and not so much the Braves, but mainly the Mets. Part of the reason why they've struggled at times, despite still being first in the division, is because of the fact that the hitting just goes so cold for such a long stretch of time. Like, wasn't there a point this season where Francisco Lindor, what was he, like 0 for 26 or something like that?
Oh my god, yeah, he's awful.
So, like, you're just having guys struggle throughout various teams. I think almost any team you could point out at least one player who struggled for legitimate portions of time throughout the season so far. And because of that, that's a big reason why we have seen a lot of these teams, get out the gates very slow. And if it's not your hitting, it's your pitching. Dame kind of pointed out the fact that for the first time in a while, the Yankees pitching is actually performing above average, but the hitting isn't there. You look at some of these other teams, the pitching isn't exactly been there. The Atlanta Braves, part of the reason why I believe they were going to win the NL East was because if fully healthy, they had a very good like 1-2-1-2-3 rotation, right? But they've just not been healthy at all this season. I think they've had injury setbacks. Like, we're really seeing injuries take a big effect. And that's the last thing I want to talk about in terms of big stories is like the injuries just affecting a lot of these teams. Like, if you're not fully healthy at this point, you are not performing well. And that it's really shown with the Atlanta Braves not doing well. I know they haven't been injured, but again, going back to poor play, like the Dodgers in terms of them slipping, they're third in the NL West right now. I do believe they will correct it, right? But ultimately, like they've had this slow stretch up until like last week and a half or so. They've been playing really good baseball again. Um, you have other teams like the Red Sox, as Dame pointed out, they've just started out phenomenal. They actually they are probably my number one team in terms of performing well. Dame, you kind of mentioned what the Giants have been doing managing wise. Alex Cora coming back, I think, is a bigger deal than most people are giving it credit for. Like he has really changed things in Boston. Their hitting is playing up to snuff. Their pitching has been pretty good to this point, and you talk about injuries. How about a guy that could come back from injury this season? If Chris Sale comes back and he's 80% of the pitcher that we saw of him in previous years, then Boston just got a more dangerous. So you have guys that are trying to get healthy. You have guys that are coming back from injury. It's all about in a 162 game regular season. It's really a game of attrition, right? So who is going to survive and who is going to be able to get past what this season has looked like so far. I do think things are going to even out eventually. Guys are going to stay healthy. Players are going to be out there. Pitching is going to hopefully cool down to an extent. Like, don't get me wrong, I love a good, pitching performance, but I got sick of the fact that we had at one point, what was it, like 3 no-hitters in a span of 10 to 12 days or something like that. That got kind of annoying. Guys, of course, are going to hit their home runs. Batting averages are going to go up. Like, everything is going to even out. In a 162 game season, by law of averages, everything will get back to somewhat normalcy. But I'm really going to be interested to see which one of these surprise teams stays afloat. And I kind of want to pose this question to you guys as just like a quick one. Like, which of these teams, we mentioned them, the Giants and the Red Sox. I don't know if there's like another team you want to put in there, but like, which one of these surprise teams do you think has the best chance to keep things going?
That's well, I hope the Yankees turn around, but between the Red Sox and Giants, I'm going with the Giants because I like their starting pitching better. The Red Sox, I feel like starting pitching is so important in this league, because of the way how bad the hitting is. I just think the Giants have a better chance because of the starting pitching. But then again, like they are in the division with the Padres and Dodgers, so it's kind of tough. But I'm gonna go with the Giants just because of the starting pitching.
Chris, any thoughts on that?
Just gonna make some stupid Mets comment.
I haven't watched. I'm behind on this. I'd rather just leave it to the Titans here.
But from everything you're hearing from us, like are you, at least from your point of view, because you didn't hear us say a word about the Red Sox and the Giants. Like, do you have any theories as to why those two teams have been good in any way, or do you just want to make fun of Dame about the Yankees not performing well?
Well, no, I mean, look, I don't hate the Yankees. I'm a Mets fan, but I think one of the reasons, like, when you're not like a baseball purist, that rivalry between the Mets and Yankees isn't deep rooted. Like, I'm not deep rooted invested into that. So if the Yankees do well, I'm not gonna be upset about it. It's not like some Knicks Nets type of thing. So I want the Yankees to do well, but weren't the Red Sox like not projected to do well this season?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I guess it adds a little bit of flavor and a little bit of unpredictability. But Dame, how do you feel about the Yankees going forward? Is there any room for optimism, or you just kind of like taking it day by day and just like
I think there is room for optimism because their hitting has been such a strength in years past, and they've shown glimpses of it lately that they can hit. They just need to be consistent with it. Like, I'm just being obviously overcritical with them because I want them to do well and because
Right.
I think they should be doing so well. But there's been glimpses of that, the fact that they could do it. So of course there's optimism going forward, but I just need to see it consistently for order me to be like, yeah, this team's gonna win the World Series.
Right, and
Alright.
you're critical because you believe that
Yeah,
they have these
exactly.
expectations, honestly, and it's interesting to see which one. Like, a lot of these teams, you have the Yankees and the Dodgers coming in with the big expectations. They're both third in their division right now. While no one had World Series expectations for the Twins necessarily, this should have been a year where they would take that next step as an organization. When you think about it, back-to-back playoff appearances, but no series wins, like playoff series wins. Like, so you need to take you need to take it to the next level, right? And as of right now, Minnesota may not even get the chance to do that because of their start. They are playing better. And again, like I said, a lot of people are projecting them to finish strong, but they haven't done well at all. They're behind the Royals, for God's sakes, in the standings. Like, that's not good. And as you mentioned, Dame, it's going to be interesting to see. I think the Mets, like, unless something happens with the Braves, the Mets are going to be really, the NL East feels like it's theirs for the taking at the moment, because that division, it feels really sad that we said it could probably be the best division in the league, and it's probably the worst. Like, it just that's a Greek tragedy if I've ever seen one. But there's all that. But like I said, I really want to see how some of these, not newcomers per se, but can a few of these teams that are at the top right now do well? Like the Chicago White Sox, I thought they would be good. They've been outstanding, to say the least. First in the division. I think they're the best record in the league, if I'm not mistaken. Minimum best in the AL, but definitely, right up there for best in the league. Like, Dame, you were high on this team going into the year. So was I. I just didn't have them winning division. But like, how legit is this White Sox team? And do you think maybe is there a move that you could see them making relatively soon, or do you think as of now they're just going to ride it out until the trade deadline comes around?
Yeah, I thought they were really good because they did go get that. I mean, I don't know if he would be an ace, but he's kind of a frontline starter in Lance Lynn, who's been fantastic this year. He has a sub-2 ERA. And him and Giolito really anchoring the top of the rotation. They got Liam Hendricks for the back of the bullpen. And their hitting has always been great. Even with Luis Robert, who's missing a lot of the season right now. He's going to be back at some point. A move I think they probably could make is probably bolster that bullpen a little more, because it is kind of just Liam Hendricks back there after these starters. But maybe a elite bullpen piece and a back end of the rotation starter. Like, they don't need another elite starter. I think obviously any team does, but I don't think that's the end all be all for them. But kind of the elite bullpen arm and maybe a back end starter that could eat a few innings here and there. I think that's what really could put them over the top.
Right. And when you look at the season, as I mentioned, a lot of teams this season that have struggled is because their pitching, whether it be their starters or relievers, haven't performed well. For the Braves, like we've alluded to, their starting pitching rotation has just kind of been decimated this season. When you look at the Minnesota Twins, their relief core, aside from like one or two guys, you don't have a lot of confidence in those players right now. And even the Houston Astros, a similar thing. The Astros actually, like, they might be second in the division right now, but they're slowly looking like they have a chance to do pretty good. They have the best run differential in the AL West, and I think as we head deeper into the season, run differential is a stat that I point out more in terms of how good is a team really. And when I look at them being way above the Oakland A's, I think the Astros are set to go on a run here. They just need the bullpen to do just a little bit more. Granted, their starting pitching rotation may not be as strong as previous seasons, but I think they've done a good enough job. I just think if the bullpen steps it up a little more here and there, and their hitters just keep on doing their thing, I have the Astros, whether it be winning the division or even if they're a wild card team making the playoffs. I think they're a really good team still and could probably shock some people in the postseason. But yeah, I really want to see how they do. And like we said, like who are the contenders, who are the pretenders? And we're definitely going to revisit this conversation in a couple of weeks' time for sure, as we slowly inch closer to the more proper halfway point of the season. Probably when everyone is about 80 games or so in, we're going to revisit things, talk about this stuff again, maybe give out some, mid-season award winners as well. Big things coming ahead. But Chris, I want you to kind of wrap it up. What do you want to say about the Mets before we finish up? And then, of course, take us home.
Yeah, I'm out.
Let's keep it up. Let's keep it up, boys. Feels good not being in the wild card race as of now, of course. Man, Lindor, please get your shit together, dog. 10 years. Please. Just yeah. First place always feels good, no matter what the odds, no matter what the circumstances are. So I'll give credit when it's due. And I hope the Yankees pick it up. All right, Dame? So shut up, son. All right? Yeah, I think we've said enough. Yeah, it was sacked week. I think phenomenal job as always, brothers. Next week, who knows? Who knows what Aaron Rodgers is gonna do? Who knows what people are gonna say about him if he gets traded or not? Who knows what the Celtics will do going forward? I'm pretty sure by next week we'll have the semifinals matchups in place for the NBA playoffs. I'm pretty sure the NHL playoffs will be towards the I mean, I don't know the structures, Jurg, but we'll be deep into the playoff
We'll be close
picture.
We'll be close to, if not in the Final Four by next week. But I'll say at minimum we're gonna be like almost there by next week.
All right, so yeah, I mean for both the NHL and NBA playoffs, we'll be towards the end for both. So yeah, that's that to all of our listeners. Thank you for listening. If you got this far, Jurg and Dane, appreciate it as always. The expertise never fails. And until next time, peace.
Take care.
Peace.